So this is going to be part 2 on my explanation of the ReDrum. The first part, we just did a very basic, quick rundown of what the ReDrum is and how to use it. In this, we're going to get into more advanced stuff and just break down all the elements that make up the ReDrum. So we had a simple sequence. I'm actually going to start off by showing you how to reset and sort of start from the beginning. So you could reset specific samples by control clicking or right clicking and selecting remove sample if you want to select just a specific section. If you want to get rid of the sequence that you did, you can do delete pattern, clear pattern, here we go. Clear pattern, and that will clear whatever pattern is currently selected. Or you can just go ahead and reset device, or in versions older than Reason 6.5, it's initialize device, and that will clear everything, bring it back to default settings. So now that we have that, I just want to go ahead and explain really fast what this is all about, because this is not default generally. Default, when you open up a ReDrum, it's going to look something like this. You're just playing into a mix channel. Really simple, just master output. So all these samples will all go through this master output into the mix channel. That's fine, but you have the option of bringing out each individual sample area to its own, has its own output. And I personally like using this and playing this one-to-one into a mixer. So not only do you get the visual sort of levels, but I also like mixing better with a fader mixer as opposed to level knobs, as well as you have more effect options. And so basically this is plugged one-to-one into here, and then this master out is plugged into a mix channel. So that's that. And now just to go down to piece by piece, breaking it down. So we talked about how C1, in part 1 we talked about how C1 chromatically up is triggering each device and allows you to play the samples. There's more functionality on the keyboard. If you get to C2, then I always found this sort of strange. Instead of chromatic, after C1, instead of going chromatic, then C2 will go up in a C scale. So C will mute channel 1 or the sample 1. D instead of C sharp, D will mute the second sample, and going all the way up in the C scale to mute the channels. Then you have to skip all the way up to C4 to get to the solos. This is where you can solo specific things, and this is again not chromatic and in the C scale, going up to solo each sample area. So that's useful to know, and we'll mess around with that a little bit once we get a sequence going. To start, we have our sort of sample selection tool. This will allow us to go up and down in whatever folder we're currently in. This is just going from the last folder that I had selected. I actually want to choose a different sample, so I'm going to go ahead and find the sample that I want. And we're going to do kick 11. I can go in that folder to select different kicks, or I can actually click on this to select stuff in the same folder, but I still want 11, so that's what we have. This is to open the browse window like you saw. This is if you want to record your own sample. So for example, I'm going to do this over here because we're actually going to use this to sample my own voice. This is something that started in Reason 5, and when I hit this button, it will record whatever is coming into this sample input. Right now it's my audio input, so you'll hear my voice. So my mic is going into it. So I'll just go ahead and record a whistle. Yeah, that should be fine. I'm going to crop this a little bit. This is our edit window, if you're not familiar with it. So there's occasionally times that you want to go back and edit a sample after you already clicked done, and you can do that. You either right click or control click and click select edit sample, or you can hold option and click this start sampling button. If you hold option while you do that, then it will actually just open right up into it. I believe on PC it's Alt, I think. Anyways, just start adding in some other samples. I'm going to go ahead and get a snare, just so we have something to work with. That's fine, it doesn't matter. Just get a basic sequence down, and we'll go up to 128 for the hell of it. Okay, so we have a super simple pattern, just so that we can mess around with these. So one thing, just moving on down the line, we have our send 1 and send 2, S1, S2, and that basically allows you to have an output, an additional output. So not only is this an output, but you also can send elements out of these buses. So you can send a little bit of multiple different drums all out into one signal using these send knobs. So one use for that would be for sidechain. So I have this synth down here with a basic sequence, and it has a compressor in it. So I'm going to just go ahead and connect send out 1 to the sidechain in left. This is going to be mono, so there's not a point to connect both of them up. And then if I unmute this and we listen to this as our drum sequence plays, as I bring this knob up, it will begin to feed in this audio signal into this compressor for sidechain. And you can see it coming in, and you hear that sidechaining pumping effect. So that's one use. There's many uses of using sends, but that's probably would be the most common. I actually don't use these sends. Instead of using the sends, I use a Spider audio merger splitter, and I connect the output of 1 into the Spider audio merger splitter, and then connect this into what I want to connect to this mixer, and then I have 3 outputs for connecting to side chains or whatever. But that's my own personal preference. I've seen a lot of other people do that as well, though. So there's various advantages. Mainly, you have a bunch of outputs instead of just a single output. In case you want to sidechain multiple devices. Moving on, we have panning, which most people know what panning is. I'm going to solo this. Right, left, panning. Pretty simple. Level. It's, I mean, since we have it plugged in here, I would probably control my level with this. But you have your level knob here. This velocity knob is controlling the amount that velocity modifies the level. So right now, if I hit harder on this key, then it will turn up the level more. If I hit softer, it will be less loud. That's because this modifier is by default turned up. Moving along, we have length. This determines the length of the sample. So instead of going in to the sample and shortening the length like this, you can actually just use this knob. That only works if you have it on this decay mode. Oh, actually, I guess it doesn't only work on the decay mode. The decay mode makes it so it's not a sharp turn down. It's more subtle. But the main reason for this functionality is you can change the sort of launch type. So if we go to our whistle sample that we have over here, with this mode, as soon as I hit the key, it will just play through the entire sample. If I hit it multiple times, then it will play it those multiple times all the way through the sample, as opposed to switching it to the gate mode, which makes it so that as long as I'm holding the note down, then the sample will be playing. So I could play it quickly, or if I hold it down, I could play it as long as I want. So it's just two different types of launching the samples. Then we have pitch as our next thing. So if we solo this kick again, pretty self-explanatory. Pitching down brings the pitch of the sample down. Pitching up speeds up and pitches it up. Tone is so the ReDrum is broken down into. There's a lot of similarities between these samples, but they're not all the same. They're broken down to three main groups. We have the ones with tone knobs, so that's 1, 2, and 10. We have the ones with the start parameter, that's 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9. And then we have the pitch bend ones, which are 6 and 7. So just to talk about these tone ones, the tone is basically adding brightness. So to hear what it sounds like, it adds higher frequencies. You can hear it, and if you bring it down, it cuts out high frequencies. As another visual, I mean, most of the time they just say it's making it brighter or less bright, but as an added sort of visual aid, it's similar to having a high shelf and turning the gain up to bring up the brightness, or turning the gain down to make it less bright. So that's the basic tone. This also has a velocity modifier option, so you can make it so that it turns the tone up if you hit harder on the note. But that's totally up to you, and by default it's off. So yeah, we have that for 1, 2, and 10. Then moving on to 4, we have a sample start, and this also has a velocity modifier, but this allows you to, I'm going to switch it back to the gate mode, but this allows you to determine, like the length parameter, allows you to determine where it's going to start. So you can start anywhere along the sample. Instead of doing it in this editor, you have this knob to start at different parts along the sample. And this again has a velocity modifier, so you can make it so that the harder you hit, the further along the sample it goes. Or vice versa, if you have the velocity on the negatives, you can make it so that when you play quieter, it starts partway through, and when you play hard, it starts closer to the beginning. So that's that. Moving on, we have pitch bend, and I'm actually going to record another whistle in here just to give us a good good thing to mess around with to get interesting sound. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to crop this a little bit. That's fine. And so now we have, I'm going to switch it to gate mode again. And pitch works normally. But we have a bend function now. So now we can say, I want it to start up higher and then bend down to this pitch. So, or I want it to start down lower and then bend up to this pitch. And then you determine the speed of that bend with this rate knob. The further down it goes, the faster. Higher up, the slower. And then we also have this velocity knob, which is going to affect the bend amount. So you can make it so that the harder I hit, the higher up it turns this bend. The softer I hit, the less it affects this bend. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the basic knobs on these sample areas. Now let's move into this sequencer area and start talking about some of this other stuff. I'm gonna just load up some additional samples just so that we can make a good sort of drum beat thing. It doesn't really matter. Oh, one of the things that we'll need is an open hi-hat and a closed hi-hat. So we'll have open hi-hat and then we'll do closed hi-hat. That's what we want. The reason for this is bank 8 and 9 have some special qualities. This channel 8-9 exclusive allows you to, well, basically makes it so that only one of these can be playing at a time. The reason, I mean, one of the main reasons for this is you can get a more realistic open hi-hat and closed hi-hat sort of relationship, if you will. So if I actually just play these with my hands, then I can cut off this sample by hitting sample 9, the closed hi-hat. Right there you didn't hear it happen because I didn't have this selected. Once I have this selected, then you'll hear what I just explained. Which is a more natural, or how you'd actually play a hi-hat if you were actually playing a real hi-hat. So it allows you to get the sort of effect that you'd expect if you were using an actual hi-hat. So yeah, that's that. Useful thing to know. The high quality interpolation basically bumps down the quality of the samples, and so if you're having CPU issues, like it's taking up too much CPU power, then maybe check that off. But for the most part, by default it's on, and it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So yeah, that's if you are having CPU issues. But for most people it works fine. Moving along, we talked about the patterns. We talked about the resolution to determine speed. Shuffle is something else. The best example to give is, I'll actually leave that there and choose a different sample pattern area, is to just use some closed hi-hats straight. So this is what straight hi-hats sound like. And then when you hit shuffle, it just shuffles this rhythm around a little bit. And on this ReDrum, you don't get to choose what the shuffle amount is. It's just a set shuffle, but it can be useful when you want to add a little bit of groove to a drum pattern or something. this hard, medium, soft are velocity values. So, I mean, if you're actually going to be recording you playing, then it doesn't really matter. But sometimes you might want to set velocity values in this actual sequencer. So maybe the first kick, I want to have a harder velocity, so it's a higher volume. But yeah, that's not something that I use a whole lot, but it's good to know what that is. Flam is another good thing to know what it is. So flam is engaged if you select the dot above a selected sample. And basically what the flam does is place the sample twice very quickly in succession. This value determines how quickly. So if I select it like if I slow this, you can hear a if I have it up higher, it's slower. If it's really short, it's going to be one right after the other and just make a thicker snare sound. This is an effect that came from, well, any drummers out there, if you can play a snare drum, you can create flam by letting the stick bounce on the snare. So it hits the snare twice in a quick succession, and that's what the flam is for. So yeah, you can either set flam by clicking on the dots, or if you select edit flam, then when you place notes down, those will be flam notes already. So yeah, anyways, that's that. I think we've pretty much reached the end of this. Let me just browse through really fast just to make sure. I think we covered everything that I really want to cover in this. There's some CV stuff that we'll talk about, but we'll talk about that when we start talking about CV. I want to leave this for now. We talked about all the knobs. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, patch select. This is how you can save. So if all these settings that you added in, all these samples that you added in, you could save as a patch to bring up in a different song, or you can load patches. Reason has a lot of patches that they give you already that you can mess around with. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully you got something out of it, and thanks.